Wait, Matt, can you hear us? Matt, are you there? Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see what's going on with Matt's audio. Matt, if your phone's on mute, you might have to unmute it. I'm not sure what's going on with the audio. Matt, if you could, maybe change yours to the mic and speaker setting, and let's see if that works better.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Enough.
Okay. There we go. And you can see my first, the first dialog screen, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The first difference that you'll see when you download this, it now has an installer. So you don't just dump it into, if you've used it before, you don't just dump it into a directory like you did before. There's actually an installer that you run because it does a whole lot more and it needs an installer now. And after you've installed it and you fire it up for the first time, the first thing you come up to is this. And before we go much further, we're going to talk a moment here about what exactly is the parts updater. The parts updater reads external data.
Matt, I'm not sure you're sharing the correct screen.
Do you see my Word document or?
We see your Word document.
Well, then. How's that screen? And it updates your parts in your SedonaOffice system. What will it not do? It will not update anything to do with inventory or standard costing or anything that affects the GL. Because it is an external utility, it cannot properly log to the GL, and so that has been disabled. But you can still set the product lines and descriptions, and is it on the sales list, is it on the service list, and many, many other things which we'll get into more later on. Okay, when you download this and install it, you actually get two programs. You get the parts updater, which is the main meat of the subject, but you also get a parts extractor, which we will talk about at the end. Okay, so we're off and we're running. The parts updater starts with this warning screen. And basically it says that this is an as-is, use at your own risk, but there is a couple of things here that are extremely important. The first one is that you make a backup of your SedonaOffice database before you run this. I like to tell people this is the nuclear weapons of utilities. There's no going back once you fire this off other than by restoring a backup. But that's not really a problem, because the other thing you should do is you should always test in your sandbox first. Make sure that it's doing what you want it to do, then turn around and put it into the live or production database. That way you should never have a problem. So once you've read and understand these warnings and these conditions, you say I accept that, and you move on to the next screen. Okay, the next screen starts with picking the database that you are going to write against. In this case, we're going to use Midnight Burglar Alarm. That's the alarm company I used to work for. And depending on your source, whether it's going to be a spreadsheet or whether it's going to be a download from PSA, you check or not check this box. In this case, we're highlighting the PSA download, so we're going to start with that. So we check the PSA download. check this one to make sure that's checked. We say next, and as a PSA download, it will bring up this dialog. Now, you have to get the information that you fill in here, the customer code, customer ID, and the URL. You have to get that from PSA. It's unique to each user, and we've given you samples of what those different things look like. So if they call it by a different name, you recognize it and put it in the right place. When you download, it may take 10 or 15 minutes. It downloads it and it stores it into a temporary table within your SedonaOffice database. And so as it takes 10 or 15 minutes to download, you do have the ability to not have to download it every time. If you're going to do 3 or 4 different things with the data you've downloaded, you don't want to do that 10 to 15 minute download every time. So if you don't actually need to download, which we don't in this case because I downloaded it previously, you can either do the download or just close that window. When you close that window, you now get the ability to sort through your records and the different pieces that you're going to pull out of the PSA download. You'll notice on the left side of the screen in this area here is a list of the PSA vendors. That is multi-selectable, and you can do things like select all, don't select all, select a few things like this, invert the selections. So you have a number of ways of controlling that list of which of the vendors in the PSA that you want to use. Then over here we have manufacturer's part number. Currently they are not supplying that in their data download. It is a null, but it's there for when they do. We're already set to use it. This is the part number, their part number, and you can put numbers in there, and it says here like, so you can do things like just type DVD in, and that will include DVD players, DVD this, DVD that, DVD discs, anything that has the DVD letters that it would then show up in that list. One of the things they provide in it is whether it is discontinued or not. So you can say, show me the things that are discontinued, so you know what you're not going to get anymore. Or you can tell it to ignore the discontinued list. It also gives you the ability to choose what modified date. So maybe you only want to see the parts that they've changed in the last week or the last month. You can say when the modified date is. Because my data is a little old, I'm going to choose this date. All right. Now, right now, when we first open it up, this is how many, because we haven't applied anything yet, any of these filters yet, this is how many parts we have in the database. 103,233. For this, I'm going to use just one supplier, and I'm going to use this date, and I'm going to say how many parts does that now? 63 parts. Okay, that's manageable. That's what I want to do. I want to do carry systems, and I'm working on that. So once you've used this filtering process to get just what you want, then you say okay, and you get the next screen. This is the mapping screen. At this point, whether you're doing it through PSA or a spreadsheet, it's exactly the same process. What you get here right now, it says PSA just to tell you what your source is, what company you're writing to. If this was a spreadsheet, right here would be the path and the name of the spreadsheet that you're doing. And this would be the columns in the spreadsheet instead of the columns in the data. But other than that, it's the exact same thing at this point. Now, you need to take these fields that are given to you and connect them to these fields, which are what is in the SedonaOffice database. And there's many ways to do that. I'll give you a few tools. One is if you double click something here, it will automatically appear in the next blank spot. So if I were to double click this again for the description, notice it comes right underneath that one. Or you can do drag and drop. So I can say this part number is the supplier part number. And so I can drag and drop. And if I have something that I just ended up putting in the wrong place and I don't know that doesn't go there, I can double click it and it disappears. If I were to do the double click over here, it puts it in the next blank spot, which is right there. Okay, so you can do all of these and fill this in. Once you get this adjusted, then you have to set the defaults. Now the defaults vary which ones you need depending on what you program over here. For instance, if I put in the price as the purchase price, purchase cost right there, okay, and let's put this description in under sales description. Okay, so once I've laid these out, it realizes that there's two things that it's going to update, and that's going to be these descriptions and the pricing based on this part number. So there's certain things over here you'll have to fill in or not fill in. Basically, fill them all in. When in doubt, fill them all in. So the supplier is going to be, and of course that opens up another window. That's just inconvenient. There's a drop down there that lists all of your different suppliers. Product line, the same thing. This lists all your product lines, manufacturers, invoice item. And once you get all of these things set, you can save that mapping so you don't have to go through this every time. All right, and conversely then, if you want to reuse that mapping, you can hit load mapping. And I'm going to load this one I've previously made up. And as you can see, it fills in everything. Now, supplier, product line, manufacturer, invoice item that it's going to use, sales markup. This works by, this is a multiplier times the purchase cost. This is a multiplier times the purchase cost to create the sales price. This is a multiplier for the service markup. This checkbox says to add all these things to the sales list, add all these things to the service price list. If I uncheck that, then it would take all of these parts off the service price list. This checkbox here says whether to show it on the customer equipment list. So if you're working in wire and you don't want wire to show up on your customer equipment list, you just uncheck that, and when you sell a job that has wire on it, the wire will be accounted for and priced appropriately in that, but it won't show up on the equipment list when you close the job. Non-valued parts is a flag we have. Typically it's for when you have used equipment that you're using for lease jobs, and that you have no actual valuation on that equipment. This one right here is very important, and it defaults to being checked. And update parts only, do not create. So let's say that you download 20,000 parts from Pelco is part of that 100,000 there. You don't want all the 20,000. You only want the 100 that you use. By checking this, if one of the parts that it brings in from PSA is not already in your database, it skips it. Okay. Now, let's say that one of those Pelco parts you get from ADI, you don't get it from PSA. All right. Then when it adds it, it would say, well, you're already getting this from ADI, not from PSA, and so I'm not going to create a new supplier. Or I can uncheck this, and if that's available there, it would put it in as a second supplier. And depending on whether you have this checked or not, it would add that supplier as the primary or not. You can control how the part, whether the part is active, inactive, or leave it the way it is. This is particularly useful for when you're rolling out a new product line. You can get it all set in. You can print up lists and whatnot for your salespeople, get everything ready to go, and then on the day that you have your rollout, you just say all of these parts, now make them active. When you put them in, you made them inactive. Now you put them in and you make them active. And the whole product line, like you're using DSC now, you're no longer using Bosch. So you can say make all the DSC active, make all the Bosch inactive, and voila, in 2 minutes you've switched your product line and pointed it another way. Halt on error. This is really more for use if you're running on spreadsheets where you may have things missing in the spreadsheet, cells that weren't filled in and whatnot. And what this says is, the first error I hit, do I stop? And typically you want to do that when you're running that first trial into your sandbox, so you can see if you've mapped something wrong or whatever without ending up with 10,000 errors in there. But when you go into production and you want to put it in, you just want it to rock and roll, you uncheck that, and when it hits an error, it just bypasses it and logs it. So that's very good for troubleshooting, get it going, PPV account, direct expense account. Now, we have so many different kinds of part numbers in this whole part system. We have your part number, your company part number, what we refer to as the SedonaOffice part number. You have the purchaser, vendor's part number, and then you have the manufacturer's part number. Well, somehow in here you have to tell the utility, how do you line up this information with that information? Now, if a lot of people use the vendor's part number as also the same as the SedonaOffice part number, and there's no problem there, and just leave it how it is. But let's say that your internal part numbers had some kind of coding that meant something to you that didn't match what you get from PSA. Okay. Sure. Right there. Okay. So this part number, and you wanted to update that, then you would say, locate this part based on this part number equaling the purchase part number that I have in there, and then update it to this one, and it would actually change the part number for you and make them match. Or you can find it by any of those. And then the last thing, which is a new feature also in this setup, is this checkbox right here. If you map UPC codes in, which PSA is not supplying, but other vendors do, and you had UPCs on that spreadsheet that you're importing, if you check this box, when it reaches the end, and if it found any UPCs, it will display those UPCs. It will tell you if you already have a barcode for that. They're called GTINs. GTIN is a wrapper that may or may not contain UPCs. We do not directly store UPCs for part codes because they're only part of the picture. But it gives you the option on a part-by-part basis. It displays a grid, and on a part-by-part basis, you can choose which one of those GTINs you want to update to that corresponding UPC that was put in. And then it will enter the GTIN so that your barcode scanner will now automatically read those UPCs. And when you get everything done and you're ready to go, you hit import data, and there it goes. And it's done. 63 parts were imported. If it had hit an error, because we have an alt on error, it would have stopped. But if we had this off, unchecked, we have to relaunch it again, had that unchecked, it would have said, and there had been errors, it would have said, operation complete, 63 parts were imported with errors, check this log file. Which brings us to support. This is just a free external utility that we provide to our customers. It is not covered under your basic support agreement. It's free for you to use, download, but that doesn't mean we're going to leave you high and dry either. So what we do is this creates a log file every time it runs, and in that log file, it logs everything it does. It logs down what databases you had, what ones were available, what one you chose, how you did your mapping, what file went to what file. If you did a spreadsheet, it gives me the name of the spreadsheet. All of this is written in this log file every time it runs. And it overwrites the log file every time it runs. So if you have a problem and there's something you just can't figure out, you take that log file, and if it's not too big, the spreadsheet, and you send both of those to me in an email. And if I can answer it in 5 minutes, life is good, and I'll send you back an answer. If it's going to be more involved in that, going to require a service ticket and quite possibly a charge, then we will let you know, saying this is more involved than can be answered in an email, and this is what we anticipate, and this is the anticipated charge, and you can say yes or no at that point. But yeah, that's why the log file's there, so that we can maximize the amount of service we provide to you and minimize the cost to you. On that, I can't remember if I mentioned that, but I'll mention it again. When you fill out all of those details on the PSA download, it remembers the last one you put in, so you don't have to type all that in every time. Okay, now the last thing that we're going to talk about and we're going to run is the parts extractor. And the parts extractor is very simple to write, or to use rather, and it is very, by the way, when you install this, you will find it under SedonaOffice, and then you will find a subdirectory underneath it. It says parts updater, and it shows all of the pieces. And you do not have to run this on the server, by the way. This will run on any client, and it runs perfectly fine. I have not seen any appreciable difference in speed whether you run it on a client or on the server. So use the parts extractor. Again, it starts with that dialog asking you to choose your company. So you choose your company and say next. And then it gives you two choices of the type of file that you're going to read. It's going to output. Typically, you want a CSV. CSV files are pretty universal. They can be read by OpenOffice, Excel, Access, pretty much every statistical, analytical application out there can read a CSV file. There are a few products that may require what they call a tab delimited file. If that, click this. But if you're unsure, unless it specifically says, you're going to want CSV. So it defaults to CSV, you say extract. It goes word, click, click, and it's done. And it creates a CSV file in the same directory where it lives. It's always the same CSV file. It's always the same name. Again, it overwrites it every time you run this. And I will show you what it creates here in just 1 second. I'm opening it up now. Okay, it will dump out every piece of data about your part in the entire system, including user-defined fields, custom fields, and some of these, because of the way Excel works, you have to spread them out to see the date. But everything, every part, every field of every part, again, excluding those things that affect the GL, such as inventory. And so this, if you save it as a spreadsheet, becomes an immediate place of where you can do work. And you can do things like, say you're rearranging your inventory, and you want to start grouping things by different product lines. Right here, you can reset the product line, turn right around, and import this spreadsheet back in to your parts update, and in an hour's time, you can rearrange all your parts into different product lines. You can sort all the parts by manufacturer. We had a customer come the other day who wanted to know all the things they got from a particular vendor. Not a problem. With this, you can just say, sort by this vendor, sort by this manufacturer, whatever. And all of these things are automatic. All the tools that you have in Excel become at your fingertips, loaded with every piece of data about your part. And that pretty much covers what I got to say.
Well, thank you, Matt. We really appreciate that. Can you go through real quick where someone would go to download this if they haven't already received it, and where do they get the utility?
Okay. Okay, so we go to All right, you go to our website and you go to resources, downloads, and it will be
At the
right
top.
here. What do we
It's
get
at
for
the
it?
top. Michael.
Oh, it's at the
It's at the
top.
top.
Oh, it is the top. Okay, so there it is. Top one. Now I do feel special.
Okay. And from there, after they download it, it's just going to walk them through how to update it. Is that correct?
Right. After that, it has a, setup exe and an MSI, just like actually has a zip file. Inside the zip file, there's a setup exe because
Okay. So what I'm
it's
going to do now, Matt, is I'm going to go through. There's some questions rolling in. I'm just going to start asking some of the questions, and then if you can, you can answer them the best you can. So anyone who has questions out there, please try to submit those now. The first question I think I could even answer is there a similar feature for the ADI download? I think it means similar to the PSA. Not at this time. There is not. But this is something we're going to talk to ADI about and see if we can do it directly with them. Right now you can do it, but if you get the ADI disk or their data file. Would
right.
that be correct, Matt?
Yes, they do provide. They used to all the time, but I've had a couple of our customers say that ADI is now hesitant about passing those out. But if you get a hold of one of their disks with their spreadsheet on it, then you would go through the Excel process and you open that file up, and then it's just exactly the way we showed with the PSA, and you can bring it in from their spreadsheet.
Okay. Next question. Can you upload more than one manufacturer or product line at one time?
Yes, either, both. You can cut and dice that data information however you want. I recommend that you try and do it in chunks of 200 to 500 parts. For instance, do all of a particular product line at a time. And not that the system won't handle it, because you can take that huge spreadsheet I just showed you, map it back in, and put it right back in again, all 5,000 parts or whatever you've got. But from a human viewpoint, working in chunks of 200 or 300 parts at a time is easier for the
Okay.
human to keep his ducks in a row.
Okay. Next question. This is, where is the PSA data stored?
It's stored in your database in your primary company, um, and it's stored in a table called PSA underscore something.
Okay. Next one. How can I see what is imported from PSA?
Well, there's two ways. First of all, you decide that when you set up those parameters from a general point of view. That tells you the parameters. But if you want to see the actual individual um, parts that were touched and what happened to them, you open up that log.txt file that's in the directory, in the install directory, and you will find, after you get all of the databases and all of the setup parameters, then in there you will see part ABC, saw this, changed to this. Part 1, 2, 3, saw this, changed to this. And it steps through part by part by part what it changed. And you will even see things like, part XYZ not found, um, settings not for new parts, skipped.
Okay. A few people have asked, and I'll try to answer this one, Matt. Who or what is PSA? PSA is a company out of Colorado, and they are a purchasing consortium for security companies and systems integrators. And if anybody's interested in information on them, just send an email to info@SedonaOffice.com, and we'll get you all the information on them. But PSA is it's a national organization. It's actually a non-for-profit organization. It's actually owned by the security companies who are members of it, or a certain amount of them. I'm not exactly sure the exact structure, but it's a fantastic buying group. Their prices are great because they try to get the best prices for their members, and their members are security companies. They also run a lot of technical training. They run what's called the PSA Tech every year, and it's a well-attended show that has all kinds of classes and seminars, especially on from installations and networking and so on. So it's a great organization. We have a lot of SedonaOffice customers who are members of them and worked with them for many years. So if you want some more information, just email us at info@SedonaOffice.com, and we'll get you all the information on that. This next question, Matt, is for you. After doing the part dump, what can we do from there? So maybe some examples of what someone can do after they export the data.
Okay. Well, one of them I mentioned, what if you want to reorganize all of your product lines? You can go into Excel and say, grab all the parts, because remember you can copy just columns and rows to another spreadsheet, and copy all of the rows that you want to go to your new, you've got a new bundling process where you're only selling certain parts to a certain range of customers, so you want to make a specific product line for that. And so you can take those parts and put them in there and give them this new product line that you're creating, and then say update these parts, and all of a sudden all those parts will change their product line. You can control very easily simple things like, okay, these are all the things that my salesman can sell, and we're dropping DSC, we're taking on Bosch, so I want to remove all the DSC from my sales pricing, and I want to put all the Bosch in. So you can copy all those parts over and uncheck it for include on sales list for all the DSC and check it for all the Bosch. And then when you run it, automatically all your sales lists change. Let's say that you have certain parts that you want to put some kind of a user-defined field on to say, if you sell this part, we also have to include this other thing here, something of that nature. You can go in there and take all the parts that you want to add that user-defined field to and fill that in, and then run it, that piece of the spreadsheet, run it again, and it will put a user-defined field in all of those.
And Matt, if I wanted to, for example, export it because I want to reset my service price, and so maybe I export the data, dump it, put it into Excel, I could create a formula that maybe has a parts markup based upon the cost of the part, and then automatically then bring that back into SedonaOffice through the updater. Would that be something you could do with this as well?
Because the updater itself will do pricing updates based on cost, but it's a simple multiplier. But if you want something more complicated, like if the price is above this, I only want this markup. If it's below this, I want this markup. And you can do that by ranges. So you can create as complicated a formula as you want in that spreadsheet from that dump, using all the pieces that are in that dump, and then put it back in again.
Excellent. Okay, this is a good question someone just asked. Are there different versions of the parts updater? This one question says that they have one now, but are wondering if I should download it again.
Yes, there are older versions here, as you can see on the spreadsheet here, and it says in each one it says what version this is good for. This particular version is good on 191 and above.
Okay. So the answer is yes, they should absolutely update it, especially if they have a new version of SedonaOffice.
Absolutely.
Right.
And you see that whenever a new version comes out, because it has to keep pace with the changes that are made in SedonaOffice, whenever there's a new version that comes out, that little window that pops up the first time you log in the morning tells you new version of the parts updater is available. Download it here. And there's a link there and everything, so that if you read that and not just click and go past it, if you actually read that, that will keep you apprised of when you need to get the newer version.
Okay. I'm just going to skip through some of these questions because there's really a lot in here. I know we only have a certain amount of time. So any question I don't get, we will follow up with you. So we apologize if we don't get to them today, but we will get back to you all the questions from this. Here, let's find one. Someone says, and this is more of a procedural question. We have about 30,000 parts inside of SedonaOffice at this time. Do you have a maximum that you recommend? 30,000 parts is a lot of parts. And if you're not really selling 30,000 parts, you probably don't want to have 30,000 parts in there, because that's a lot to maintain, and it's going to, at times, depending on what you're doing, it could actually take up a lot of resources. So you asked if there's a recommendation. There's not really a set recommendation, because each company is unique. So it's really something that you'd have to really think about from your business. But if you really want to follow up on that, feel free to give us a call or to our support. Matt, can you, I'm going to go to the next question. Can you touch on how to set up a sandbox and show someone how you do a sandbox database?
On the server is in the start menu is the SedonaOffice server utilities. And when you click on that, you get a dialog and you get a number of things. Let me see if I can get that up on my screen here so people can see it. Okay, it looks like this. All right, and right here is the sandbox wizard. You open that up, and you get this screen, and it says, what is the source? Let's say I was going to copy my, and this is by database names, not by the name in the, like, sandbox.
Not the company name, it's the actual database name.
Database name. And you choose one that you want to copy. All right, next step, what do you want the sandbox to be? Notice that it says sandbox here. If you type in, some other characters, when I run this, it will append sandbox to it automatically. Okay, and then the next time you hit next, it asks you where you want to, because it makes a backup of the company, source company, and then restores it as the sandbox. You've got to have a certain amount of space to do that in. So if you've got some drives that are full, you get to pick the area where you want that backup to sit, so that you're not trying to put it into a disk drive that doesn't have enough space. So you can choose that right here. But then from this point on, when you hit next, from here, it will make a backup and then restore that backup in the sandbox, which has a second benefit. You make backups every night, I hope. Please tell me you are. Making backups every night. But no backup is ever 100% until you restore it. Then you know it works. This process creates a backup and then restores it. So that backup that you use to create a sandbox is guaranteed 100% that it's good. You know it's good because you just restored it into a database. So I recommend that you regularly, how often the schedule is up to you, but you regularly update your sandbox, if for no other reason than to verify your backup process.
Here's a question. It said, Matt's example starts with a dump from PSA. Can one start with the cost data that already exists within SedonaOffice database itself?
Yes, because that's what the extractor does. That's all the cost data that's within the database itself.
Okay. So just a few questions came in. PSA is just a feature within the parts update utility. By no means do you have to use PSA to use the parts update utility. You can use it with other source data that you receive from other vendors, whether you get an Excel spreadsheet or a CD, as well as Matt showed, you could just export data directly from SedonaOffice with it as well. Okay.
I'll show you real quick. This time I am not going to check PSA because I'm going to use a spreadsheet. And the first thing it does is it asks me for a spreadsheet. This sample price list, which is way outdated, but it comes here so you can see how it looks. All right, so I'm going to open up that sample spreadsheet. And then when you see a spreadsheet, It asks you which tab of that spreadsheet you want to use. As you can see, that was from 2003. And then here are your Excel columns. And again, just like the PSA, only now the data source is this spreadsheet, not PSA. But from this point on, it's exactly the same process, except now we're getting it from the spreadsheet. And I can even load the mapping that I have previously saved. It also comes with sample mapping. And there you go. And you name those mapping files whatever you want, so you can have a mapping file for every task that you do.
So Matt, if a part is not, go back to that last form that you had up there, and if one of the questions came in is, what if a field's not mapped, such as like sales part? Can you set the default value for that to either be yes or no, so that it will automatically update that for when you do the upload?
That's correct, and I'll show you how that works. Okay, in this case, let me load that mapping again. Okay, right here, we have this set. All of these parts will be added to the service price list here and added to the sales here. If there's a default here, now if I'd had that as one of my things on the spreadsheet, I can put that right in here. Service part, yes or no, Y or N. Okay, sales part, Y or N. If this is blank and you have it mapped, then it will use this default. If you did not map it, so you said, I don't want to change any of that. That's fine the way it is. I don't map it. It will ignore these defaults. It does not automatically change the default if you don't map it.
Okay. So one way to do it is to just add a column to your Excel file and then map that column to the correct value.
Exactly, which is, again, in the parts number.
Very good. Okay. Well, and I think that's going to do it for today. I want to thank everyone for attending. Matt, thank you for demonstrating the parts updater. Again, if you have any questions on it, feel free to email our support at SedonaOffice.com. There were a lot of other questions that did come in. Some were very specific, so I didn't go through those, but we'll go through all the questions and get back to everyone. And as I said earlier, don't forget, take advantage of those specials that we have going on now. And if you haven't signed up for the Users Conference, remember, it's not too late. And again, thank you, everyone. And if I don't talk to you beforehand, have a happy Thanksgiving.